election debate for Arizona's Congressional District 7. This September 23rd special election was called for by Governor Katie Hobbs after the recent death of Representative Raul Grijalava. Today's debate is sponsored by Clean Elections, the state's nonpartisan voter education agency. My name is Nohelani Graf, and I'll be moderating this conversation. The way we're sharing this debate is part of an innovative effort to support democracy in Arizona. And it's thanks to a partnership with the Clean Elections Commission, the Arizona Media Association, Reister, and Arizona Public Media in Tucson. And we're working to make sure that this debate for this race is the most accessible in Arizona history. So that means that this debate will air on a long list of local TV stations, radio stations, digital platforms, including support from local newspapers. We have tried to keep the rules simple here. Each candidate will have up to 2 minutes to make an opening statement and up to 1 minute for a closing statement. Candidates have drawn straws to determine the order for each of those portions of this debate. Throughout the discussion, I will pose questions to each candidate, allow them to answer, and then make sure the other candidate has a chance to respond. Whenever a question is directed to a specific candidate, only that candidate's microphone will be open. At all other times, both microphones will be open. We also want to say thank you to voters across Arizona who have submitted questions for this debate. We assure you no candidate has been given advanced access to any of the questions. But with that, let's introduce the candidates for this debate. Republican nominee Daniel Butierez and Democratic nominee Adelita Grijalava. And Daniel Butierez, you do have the first opening statement. You have 2 minutes.
I want to thank you all for being here tonight, and I especially want to thank my wife, who has put up with all this and stood by my side and worked as hard as anyone else possibly could have. And I want to tell you a little something about myself. This is my home. I was born here. And through the course of it, I've gone through a lot of struggles through my life. I'm a construction worker. I've spent my entire life working constructions. Eventually, I started my own business. I built my business from nothing. I also overcame a wrongful conviction, overcame homelessness, drug addiction, and several years ago, the courts wound up ruling and the state acknowledged that I was convicted of a crime that I did not commit. From that, I asked myself, why did I go through all that? What was the purpose? And while I was driving around the city, I was looking at all the homeless and all the things that were happening in our city that's falling apart. It's not getting any better. Nobody seems to have a clue how to address the issues. So I decided that I would run for United States Congress. I'm not running because I want to be a politician. I never had a desire to be a politician. I'm running because I love my city, I care about my state, and I care about the people that live within this state. So I decided to run for United States Congress to represent you and serve you. Thank you.
Adelita Grijalva, you have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you. Hola, buenas tardes. Good evening. My name is Adelita Grijalva. Over the last 5 months, I had an opportunity to drive all over this beautiful community of CD7, from Douglas, Nogales, Avondale, Tolleson, Sells, Bisbee, Patagonia, and of course, Tucson. I've learned in my communications with people, our conversations, our talks, that we all share the same values. We all care about the same things. We want a community that is vibrant and safe and protections for all of our community members. We care about public education, our environment, and having a wonderful quality of life. We want opportunities in our communities. And I, right now, as a mom of 3, am afraid for the future of our children. I'm afraid for the future of our state and the future of our country. We have in power right now an administration and an executive that is systematically taking away our rights little by little. We feel attacked, scapegoated, and what I have heard repeatedly is that we need a fighter. And I am asking for your vote and your support to send me to Congress so I can fight for Southern Arizona and bring your values, your vision, your hopes, your dreams, and your struggles to the halls of Congress to talk about what is important in our communities. It has been an honor and privilege to meet many of you, and I'm humbly asking for your support. My name is Adelita Grijalva.
Let's get to tonight's topics. And we are going to start with immigration because that does continue to be national concern and focus, specifically with immigration enforcement tactics. In Arizona specifically, Senator Mark Kelly recently criticized the detainment of two mothers long in the U.S. With no criminal history, and he called it a waste of taxpayer money and lacking morals. Meantime, Co-Chief County Sheriff, who at one time saw the highest number of border crossings in the country, says that the president's plan has drastically improved the problem. So first, Mrs. Grijalava, I'll ask you, how do you evaluate the current strategies of ICE, and what reforms, if any, would you propose to balance effective enforcement with protecting human rights? You have 2 minutes.
Right now, we have ICE and an enforcement that is using inhumane tactics of lying to people, misrepresenting themselves, and targeting anyone that looks like me, someone that looks like Mexican American, positioning themselves all over our communities. And I'm very frightened of what it's going to look like next year when ICE's budget is not double, but 20 times what it is right now. Immigrants generate $71 billion in annual economic output. And to Southern Arizona, into Arizona alone, it's $704 million each year in state and local taxes in Arizona. The militarization of our communities is something that we have to fight against. And what I will fight for is comprehensive, humane immigration reform with pathways to citizenship. We have people in our communities that have lived here for over 2 decades and still do not have a pathway to citizenship. We have DACA recipients that do not have a pathway to citizenship. And with this administration, the rules keep changing. And when you are systematically intervening in due process, people that are going to our courthouses right now for their appointed time, their case is dismissed, they leave, and they're detained by ICE. This is costing us $245 per bed per day. From this administration that says they want to keep the federal government out of our everyday, this is an incredible draw of resources. It is inhumane, and it should be intolerable for any of us to see what is happening to our immigrant communities. They are deporting veterans. They are deporting citizens. We should all be very afraid.
Mr. Butierez, same topic. Do you think that the ICE tactics, immigration enforcement, need reform? And if not, to those who say that the tactics undermine trust from the immigrant community that is here legally, how do you reconcile that with them? 2 minutes.
Well, first off, the rules aren't changing. The laws are being enforced. Okay. The ICE agents are doing what the law requires them to do, not what the administration's requiring them to do. The only thing the administration's requiring them to do is enforce the laws that are already on the book. Now, we're asking for jobs and positions to be makers of the law, not breakers of the law. And what many on the left are wanting, and even some Republicans, there are some, are wanting is people to ignore the law and continue on what they're doing. I believe we need to have immigration reform. We absolutely need to do that. And the gentleman that was in this seat prior to us has spent the last 2 decades trying to do that. It didn't work. So I believe it's time for different leadership, a different direction, someone who has built things, accomplished great things, to go in there and change that. That someone's me. I've seen tremendous migration coming across our border. My opponent may be right, she may be wrong, but it's also costing us trillions of dollars. And it cost us, I know Pima County spent approximately $50 to $60 million on it right here in Pima County. And now they're in a spot where they don't have any money to run our city. The buses are all paid for and they want to increase our taxes. They went with 414 and the whole community came together, Democrats and Republicans, and voted that down. And I'm hoping we come together here and do a change in Arizona. Thank you.
1 minute to respond.
It's a little bit of a conflation of a lot of different issues. One, I believe, was speaking specifically about the asylum seeker program. That's a federally funded program, did not draw from our tax dollars here locally. And then a completely different conversation about the free bus system in the city of Tucson, where I think that the federal government needs to intervene and support is local solutions to bigger problems. And that's one of the things that has happened, and those cuts have happened as a result of this administration. So when you look at HUD getting a 44% cut in being able to build affordable housing, that's going to negatively impact our local community here. When you see cuts to our health department, mental health, physical health, all of those are going to continue to provide services. Those programs being cut, we're going to exacerbate the problem. And one of the first things that I want to do when elected is to sign on to the Protect Sensitive Locations Act. So we have our schools, our churches, and medical facilities protected from ICE.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a minute to respond to that also, Mr. Butierez, but if you can stick with immigration for now, we'll get to more topics later. And you mentioned that you do believe there needs to be reform. Do you have specific steps that you would add when it comes to immigration? 1 minute, please.
Okay. Well, for starters, we need to get all those that came here during the last 4 years, get them back out of the country, because what's happened is our courts are overwhelmed. They're packed. We don't have enough judges. We don't have enough attorneys. And those that came in here the right way get moved to the back of the bus, per se, because criminal cases go prior to civil cases. And those that are trying to come here the right way haven't broke any laws. They're trying to do it the correct way. The ones that came across here illegally have court dates, and we have to justify whether or not they came in here legally, whether they have true asylum cases, and determine that and either ship them back to the countries they came from or let them proceed through the process.
So to be clear, do you support people who have been detained attending their court dates as they're supposed to, and then they're being removed at the courthouses, or should that be refined?
I'm not as familiar with that as a lot of people, and I got a lot of hearsay on it, read some case on it. I'm with them if they've broken the law and the judge sets it back, because they came in here, they flooded us in here. So what's trying to be done, in my understanding of it, and this is from the immigration attorney, that once the court grants that ruling, then they go back to square one and they have to come through the process the correct way, which most of them did not.
Mrs. Grijalava, 30 seconds on repairing the system.
People that came in through seeking asylum, that is a legal process. That is a system that they have checked in, they talked, they were processed, and then came into Pima County and other areas across the nation. The reason why we know where people are is because most have an ITIN number, a tax identification number. Why do you think we have ICE agents going to people's houses asking for specific information? People are not hiding. They are being taken out of their homes when they're contributing to our communities.
Let's talk and refine a little bit more about infrastructure and border security itself, because the barriers, the wall itself has gotten mixed results. They want to extend more with this administration, build more. So do you believe that the infrastructure investments so far can be measured and justified by the cost? Mr. Butierez, I'll start with you first, 2 minutes. Would you support other investment in infrastructure, and what would that be? How would you weigh that outcome?
Well, right now we're expanding the port of entries, which needs to be done because it will profit both Mexico and us. The ports are too small. And securing that border, I do believe we need to finish the wall. I do believe I would be more qualified than my opponent in that aspect, because unlike my opponent, I actually know that there's more than 3 ports of entry. There's actually 6 major ports of entry and several other small ones. We have San Luis 2, Lukeville, Nogales, Douglas, in Mariposa. There's also the smaller ones. There's a few around Nogales, but you also have Sassabee and Naco. Sassabee is the port, is where the migrants were supposed to come through, is through Sassabee, but it's been closed. So all those that entered Mexico, entered Pima County, have entered this country illegally, because by law, you have to come through a port of entry. You can't just cross anywhere across the border you want. So they didn't come in the correct way to get it. They allowed them to have asylum, but they did break the law when they entered this country.
Mrs. Grijalava, I'm going to give you 2 minutes on infrastructure because you also touched on environment in your opening statement. So, how would you, if barriers, critics say that it harms migration of wildlife and ecosystems, so how would you weigh environmental impacts with national security needs?
Well, right now, the environmental needs are not being considered. I think one of the things that has to be done is we have to have an impact study. Most of these areas are so far removed that that's not where people are crossing. It really is our species. And when you're looking at the border, you have people on both sides that are part of tribal nations. And so you're creating a barrier to people being able to go back and forth historically when they've been able to do that with their own citizenship of their own tribal lands. So it's an incredible cost. It's not going to have the deter, but it is going to impact a lot of sacred facilities. And specifically when we're talking about modernization of the ports of entry, those are funds that were dedicated in the previous Congress that we've still not fully implemented. And when we look at the importance of modernization, which I think is incredibly critical, you have to also understand that we're going to need more customs agents. And the customs agents, that increase for funding is really dedicated to ICE and enforcement. So we have a lot of inhumane tactics. We are really looking at like a lot of fear mongering and a lot of scapegoating of our border communities. And that being able to cross fairly freely is something that we've done in the past, but also is a necessity for many people who have an H-2A visa, businesses on this side of the border that are having a very hard time with workers being able to flow back and forth. All of that is going to be critically important and something that is really been clogged up with this system that we have right now. And there is absolutely an issue with the processes, with our legal, with our courts. All of those are all backlogged, and we need to dedicate more funding to that and allow a pathway to citizenship for people who have been here for a significant amount of time, including DACA recipients.
Mr. Butierez, I'm going to give you a minute to respond. Yeah.
Okay, well, what she said about them coming through, she's right, but they're supposed to come through a port of entry. That's not what's been happening. They're crossing the border. At Sassabee, for example, 14 miles up is where the wall ends. The construction stopped. Hundreds were coming across there. They're not now, but they were coming across daily. I went there. I've been there many times and watched this happen. The Border Patrol drove up, picked them up, took them down to the Border Patrol where they processed them. Then they took them up 3 points, loaded them up on buses and drove them into Tucson. The problem there is that border where they cross is where they're bringing in illegal drugs. Most people think they're coming from the port. They bring pills through the port, which have very little drugs in it, and across the border where there's nobody monitoring, or wasn't before, they're bringing in pure fentanyl, and it's killing our people. And I don't care what it costs. An American life matters.
Mrs. Grijalava, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to speak to what needs to happen to stop the flow of drugs, because that is part of border security.
We have an incredible enforcement. They're capturing drugs every day. What we really need to focus on, in my opinion, is looking at the consumers, the people on this side in the United States that really need to look to prevention programs, early intervention programs, and substance abuse programs, coincidentally, all of which are being cut with this new, in this upcoming fiscal year.
I'm going to switch topics now, and this is a topic that you have both addressed in previous debates. Oak Flat. It has become a flashpoint with Native tribes and conservationists opposing a proposed copper mine, while others argue that it could generate jobs and it could secure U.S. resources. Mr. Butierez, I'm going to start with you because during the primary debates, I asked a yes or no question. Do you support mining at that site or not? You said yes, but you hesitated. I want to give you 2 minutes now. Where do you stand? And if it came to mining on that site, would you push for any safeguards to be in place? You have 2 minutes.
I would absolutely push for safeguards to be in place and replacement of any damage done to the land other than the mine itself. But yeah, I would support the mining.
Okay. Mrs. Grijalva, where do you stand? And should Congress play a role in determining whether Oak Flat should be protected or used for copper mining?
Yes, Congress should intervene. I do not believe that that is a sacred site for Apache Stronghold, and they deserve to keep that site. The way it was set up, the only reason why this property is on any kind of list at all is because it came in through a 2014 rider that was approved by Congress. And so Congress has a role to protect that site. And we have to look at what is governing mining right now. It's an 1872 mining law, 1872. And so looking at the changes that have to happen, one of the first things is that royalties right now to the United States go outside of our country. We don't collect any of those royalties for 4 years. So you mine, you destroy our environment, our air, our water, and our land, and then leave. And many of these mining companies are foreign mining companies, and they change hands often. So when you look at something like Project Blue that was proposed here in Tucson, and people were very upset because it was 2 million gallons of water a day, there is a mine proposed in Patagonia that's going to use 6.5 million gallons of water a day. Those are the things that we should be outraged about. And when you look at the sacred site and the fact that they've continued to have some successes in court, it's because people understand there is no way to safeguard that location. When the mine starts coming in, they're going to drill underneath. And at some point, every statistic has shown that it will not be safe to stand on. That is a site that generations have come for the equivalent of like a quinceañera, sweet 16, a coming of age. And it is sacred to the people, and we should protect it.
Mr. Butierez, would you like to respond?
Yeah, well, I agree that these are companies coming out from their countries coming in here taking our resources. And if they're going to be taking our resources, they need to pay us for those resources, or we need to sell them to a different company. And these mines are going to continue to do no matter what, because there is such a mass demand for electric cars, which require all these minerals that they're going to mine. And I don't foresee the Democrats halting any desire for electric cars. So they're going to continue to want to mine. And the Blue Project's a perfect example. I don't know if you've read the news lately, but they're still moving forward with the Blue Project, and they're doing it right where they did it before, and they're still going to use our water. And that was, I just read it in the news today. And that's what these big companies are doing.
Mrs. Grijalva, 30 seconds to respond.
Well, we have many examples throughout Arizona of where mines have left scarring, tailings, where things don't grow anymore. The quality of life in those areas has continued to decrease, and the jobs that are promised really rarely come to fruition. And the cleanup that is also promised, once they've changed hands a couple of times, Company A no longer exists, and they're not responsible. Having lived in a Superfund site, I know what that hardship is, and we have to protect our community.
Okay, let's move on to another topic, and it's sticking with the topic of other foreign entities and our relationships with them and your role in Congress. The conflict in Gaza has drawn international attention. Famine declared in Gaza while Israel still waits for hostages to be returned. Mrs. Grijalva, I'll start with you. How should Congress balance America's alliance with Israel against concerns over civilian casualties in Gaza? You have 2 minutes.
The United Nations has declared a stage 5 famine, which means starvation, destitution, and widespread death. Our role should be one of creating an opportunity for peace and a two-state solution, where humanitarian aid must be restored to Gaza, the Gaza Strip, and all hostages must be returned and as well. I think the two-state solution ensures that Israelis and Palestinians can live in peace with security and dignity. And we have to work to combat the rising Islamophobia and anti-Semitism in our country. I think that it's so important that when we look at the definition, because this conversation has continued to come about, where one of the first things Trump promised initially was that he was going to bring peace. That is actually one promise that I wish he would keep, because we have a significant role in the United States in order to combat and compel Israel to come to the table to create a two-state solution. It worked before. It's not perfect, but will it bring an end to the devastation of the people? I absolutely agree with that and think we should. And when you look at the United Nations, not only declaring a stage 5 famine, but also declaring a genocide, I think it's important that we understand that there is a systematic attack on people. And we have a role to play in order to make sure. I mean, I just don't understand how, as people, like as a mom of 3, when you look at children who are starving, how you can sit back and say, I'm not going to take a position. We have to. And we've seen more and more leaders on both sides of the aisle take a position. And that is something that I'm ready to do. Unequivocal condemnation of what's happening there, what's happening with Hamas, but what is happening with Israel's government.
Mr. Butierez, similar question. Where do you stand on this topic? What role should Congress play in shaping policy toward Israel and Palestine, particularly balancing military aid with humanitarian concerns? 2 minutes.
Well, I stand with Israel, and I don't see, we've tried diplomacy. Israel's tried diplomacy. As long as Hamas is in there controlling that country, we're not going to get anything accomplished. Israel takes the food in, Hamas takes the food from the people of the Palestinians, and I'm all against war. I'm completely against war. But there are things that the only thing we could do there is back Israel. I mean, there's nothing else going to happen. You're not going to get Hamas to come to the table. They're not going to sit down. They've tried that. And granted, Israel shouldn't attack Hamas either when they did that. Or it was Iran, I'm sorry. They didn't attack Hamas, they attacked Iran. I don't see Hamas ever coming to the table. Their only desire is to see Israel's dead. So,
Ms. Grijalava, you have a response, 1 minute.
Yeah, I think that we need to get away from this idea that if we're critical of the Israeli government, that we're anti-Semitic. The same way I can condemn Hamas, I am supportive of the Palestinian people being able to live in peace, security, and dignity. Israelis should be able to do the same. I can be incredibly critical of Trump and still be a very proud American. We have to compel Israel to come to the table and negotiate in peace. There is no way for us to do this otherwise. We are an ally, and they do depend on us. And so when you look at the aid that is being provided by the United States to Israel, there are also humanitarian laws that are in place. And Israel has to work within the law. And I think that conditional aid is critically important and something that we have to exercise.
When it also comes to foreign policy, and another ongoing war is between Ukraine and Russia. The focus there has often more been so about money and the spending there. So in sending billions in aid to Ukraine, I will ask you both, but I'll start with you, Mr. Butierez. Do you believe that continued support of Ukraine is essential for global security, or should Congress reduce their involvement and funnel that money to more domestic needs? 2 minutes.
Well, I was against sending money to there, especially when they wouldn't tell us where it was spent. I had a problem with that. But at this point in time, we're too far into this. Russia can't continue on. We need to get in there and support them, period, and end this war.
Support, to clarify, support.
Give them more weapons and
Ukraine.
Get this Ukraine, yes.
Mrs. Grijalava, spend more to support Ukraine, focus some of the money on needs here in Arizona.
Russia declared war on the Ukraine. So when they did that, it made us all more unsafe. We need to make sure that, I mean, that was another actual promise that Trump made, that there was going to be peace in Ukraine day one. Well, here we are. And the only accommodations that Trump has made is to offer aid in exchange for basically all the mineral resources that Ukraine has. And what I've seen with this administration is support is always conditional on what do I get back. So I believe that the United States has to stand in solidarity with Ukraine, provide them the humanitarian aid that's necessary, and provide them the strategic support in order to push back on Russia.
Both of those topics on foreign policy, not only divisive between parties, but within parties as well. So let's talk a little bit about party politics and also bipartisanship. Mr. Butierez, first, you are running in a long-standing blue district. Tonight, you're not really here to convince Republican voters. You're here to appeal to the independents or Democrats at odds with their own party. So how can those voters trust that you won't just vote along party lines if you are elected, and you will advocate for all constituents? 2 minutes.
I can tell you, when I first registered to vote, I registered as a conservative, and I would flip over to Republican to vote for a candidate that I was interested in. Both my parents were Democrats. I never aligned with the Democrats. I can remember telling my dad, "Dad, you're not a Democrat." And my dad believed in holding people accountable and yada, yada. I just said, "Dad, you are not a Democrat." Well, he was in his 80s when he realized that he wasn't a Democrat, but it took a while. I believe we used to be more united 20 years ago. I was with my son's mother. She was a Democrat. I was a Republican. We never had a problem. Until recently, the parties have become so split within themselves that we're fighting with each other. We're fighting with our own parties. The Republicans are fighting with each other. The Democrats are fighting with each other. And I got into this race to unite us together as one again, to be so that we can sit down with our relatives and have dinner. And it's going to be a tough job, but I've been pulling a lot of Democrats in, and I actually have a lot of Democrats that are out door knocking for me. So.
Mrs. Grijalava, to inter-party fighting and politics there, your opponent says people are ready for change. Your late father, respectfully, was the first in Congress to call on President Biden to step down, citing health and age. Younger voters are calling for generational change. If you were elected, would you support term limits? And what would you think are appropriate, considering a president can serve 8 years? You have 2 minutes.
I think that it's important that when we're looking at the divisiveness of our two parties, that we have a lot of people registering as independents. I think there are people that are very specific on issues. And I think that that's critically important. And one of the things that I focused on in this campaign is about policy. America is hurting right now. And we have young voters that have never experienced a functioning democracy in their lifetime. 18 to 25 years old, we have a generation that has been disillusioned by both parties because they feel nobody is speaking up for them. And so when the question comes up, my father was fortunate enough to represent this community in Congress for 22 years, overall elected to offices for 50 years. I believe that every community deserves the right to elect their own representative. They get to decide who is the best speaker for them, who is going to carry their message for them. And so I don't believe that has to do with age. I think it has to do with integrity and values and who is speaking truth to power for your community. And having had the opportunity to visit with so many people in CD7 from all parties, what they admired is somebody who is unapologetic for Southern Arizona. And that is what I am running to do. I do not believe that term limits is the solution to what is happening in a very dysfunctional environment. The question was asked, how are you going to work amongst? Part of the problem is that it's difficult to negotiate with extremists. And so we have to go in there with talking about policies and values and less about political posturing.
It does become more polarized, though, by the day within Congress, and it is harder to pass legislation. So, Mrs. Grijalva, for you would be in the minority if you were elected to this position. When we previously saw the vote on the most recent federal budget, there were several members in Congress, in the Senate rather, who said they did not like the budget, but there were lines in their item lines that supported needs in their state. So I will ask you first 2 minutes, if there is something that is up for a vote in Congress and they are willing to give you something that would benefit Arizona, maybe it's protecting environmental lands, would you be able to break with your party if it benefited your district?
You have to look at the holistic. And I think when you look at the holistic and the number of people that are going to be kicked off of Medicaid, when you look at the number of people who are losing their jobs, the attacks on the Department of Education, on the Department of Labor, you can't look at one little piecemeal. And that was the frustration, is Trump worked that one member, that senator, different times to say, well, I'm going to exempt you from this. And how un-American for you to throw the rest of the country under the bus in order to save yourself. I think it's important to work within the system that is created. But if these senators and members of Congress were honest with their communities and what they sold them out for, they wouldn't get reelected. And so I am going to be a voice for Southern Arizona if given the privilege to represent the community in Congress. And I think that that is where I am beholden to the people of this community, not to anybody else, no special interest. And when you look at these specific programs that may or may not benefit your community, you have to look at it as a whole, because as a whole, with that horrible bill, Arizonans are going to lose.
Mr. Butierez, if you're elected, you would not be in the minority. So how would you make sure that your district concerns, water, border management, are not overshadowed by national party agendas if they didn't align with what you saw needed to happen in the district?
Well, thank you for that question, because I have said this before. The biggest thing is that I would have the majority in Washington behind me. The next big thing is they would want me to win again next year. So I would obviously have to bring resources to Arizona that would make Arizona want to elect me again next year. And as I've told many people, that there's another election next year. I could bring the resources. If I don't bring the resources, they can have it at another primary, and with the Democrats and the Republicans, and elect somebody else. And that's what I'd be working for, to make sure that they unanimously voted for me again next year.
I will stick with you, Mr. Butierez. When we are talking about the new federal budget, there are cuts to funding for housing assistance, shelter programs, cuts to Medicaid, and that supports mental health and drug rehabilitation resources. You've stood on a plan to help some who are homeless. So how will you make it work with less money in the coffers? Do you believe that housing first strategies should take priority, or should federal dollars target treatment programs? 2 minutes.
Federal dollars need to target treatment programs before they do housing programs, which is a problem that I'm watching them spend our money trying to build housing and do housing. But if you haven't dealt with the undercurrent, the problem, then you're just wasting money and spreading out the problem that is going to ultimately collapse on itself. We need to address treatment and then move towards housing. I actually have a plan to help them move into housing, to help them get their self-esteem back, to help them get off their drugs. I have written out a plan. It is a really good plan.
Do you believe that can still happen with federal cuts to those programs?
Actually, Trump already came out and said he would spend whatever it took to address those issues. So they're already setting the money aside to address the homeless crisis and the drug crisis.
Ms. Grijalava, I'll come to you with cuts to those services. And again, we talked about you would be in the minority. So is there something that you fight for under the umbrella, if you have to choose something to really stand on under the umbrella of, say, Medicaid? What would that be, and how would you get those dollars back?
The problem is that this administration is willing to sell out the American people to provide big tax breaks for the 1%, and also add to our national deficit, which is what I thought the Republican Party specifically was against, adding to the debt. So I found it really fascinating when Trump utilized his sort of, whether he was tweeting on X or on Truth Social, talking about targeting individual members publicly if they didn't support these initiatives. These are cuts, these are real cuts. And the unfortunate part of it is that most of them are going to come to fruition after the midterms. Not a coincidence. I don't think, I mean, I think, it's going to be a lot harder to get elected when you have, specifically here in Arizona, 383,000 people kicked off of Medicaid. 142,000 of those are children. These are programs that fund SNAP benefits. They fund programs in our schools for occupational therapy, speech therapy, physical therapy. Those are all going to be systemic devastation to so many of our systems. We have 5 rural hospitals, 2 in CD7, 3 that are nearby that serve CD7 residents that are in danger of closing because they are almost fully funded by patients that are on Medicaid. Those are real life situations. And that's what we have to fund. That's what we have to work to fund. And we have to highlight to the American people that the only people who are going to be able to reverse this is them, is the voters.
In 30 seconds, do you partner with local governments to ensure accountability, since it is now up to states to fund those programs themselves?
There's no way.
In some instances?
Yeah, there's no way that, like, Tucson, the city of Tucson, for example, is going to be able to absorb the $5 million cut that they're going to see in the community block grant programs. There's no way that we're going to be able to absorb in a system like Tucson Unified the federal cuts that are coming. There's no way to absorb it. So what's going to happen is we're just going to have people without.
Mr. Butierez, I'll give you a minute to respond.
Well, she's right. There's going to be a lot of people that suffer through that, especially in CD7, because we are run by social programs which are collapsing on themselves. The free bus rides in Tucson here, we need to stop that, address that crisis. We have too many programs where they're just giving money away here in Tucson, and I had someone say that Mrs. Grijalava was a communist, which isn't true. She's a progressivism, and there's a difference. Communism takes away a person's property. Progressivism lets you keep the property, and they take away your profits.
Mrs. Grijalva, 30 seconds, respond.
I do believe that people should pay their fair share. And I don't think that that's happening with this administration. And when you look at someone who's going to make $783,000 a year, getting back $70,000 in taxes, and somebody that's making $23,000 a year getting back $10 in their taxes, that's the difference. The people that are at the top of in the financial system, you're making more money, you should pay your fair share.
Let's talk briefly about school choice and vouchers. School choice vouchers have been expanded in Arizona. Some want to use it as a national model even. Several recent investigations have shown some families are using the money for lavish purchases. But there are also others who say that this does provide a path for families to have other options that they otherwise wouldn't. So do you support further expansion of vouchers? Do they require more oversight? Mrs. Grijalva, 1 minute.
I absolutely do not support vouchers. I don't support the system in general. I think is it a systematic attack on public education. And when you look at the accountability, there isn't any. There isn't any. You can buy $2,000 worth of Legos, and our Arizona school superintendent is allowing those purchases to go through. People are going on vacation, going to Disneyland. These are funds that are helping to support all of our children in Arizona. And I believe that parents should have the option to choose whatever education system they want for their own child. But when you are over 90% of the children in CD7 attend our public schools, it is a fraction, and it is a fraction of what is needed for a private education. So these families have historically not had their children attend public schools. And now what they're doing is taking public dollars to to fund private education.
Mr. Butierez, 1 minute. Do you believe the vouchers are working? Do they need more refinement?
I would expand the voucher program. I would suggest that the state look at other alternatives to fix things like such. There's thousands of kids coming across the border every year. Who's paying for their education? They have addresses here, but they don't live here. They should be paying a tuition. There's programs in the schools that need to be removed, and that, which is the reason that parents are pulling their kids out of the public schools. The public schools are indoctrinating their children. They don't want their children in those schools. Mrs. Grijalava has been in there for 20 years and done a lot of things in the school that has led to parents wanting to pull their kids out, such as indoctrination.
30 seconds to respond, Ms. Grijalva.
Fighting for bilingual education, fighting for culturally relevant curriculum, fighting for access for every child, accepting every child that walks into the door, that is public education. And when you look at, we spend in Arizona $20,000 more per inmate per year than we do to fund our K-12 system. If we want safer communities, if we want smarter investment, it should be in schools, not in prisons.
Do you believe that teacher pay and classroom resources should be a federal priority or left to the state legislatures? 30 seconds.
I believe that the bar should be set for federal priorities, and then every community that also has tax bases and that kind of thing can supplement that. But if we learned nothing during COVID, when we relied so heavily on our educators, we need to pay them as the professionals that they are. Our teachers right now are having to take second and third jobs when they're teachers. They are shaping our next generation. We need to treat them like the professionals that they are.
Should the federal government, Mr. Butierez, be putting more effort and more money into teachers here in Arizona and the classroom?
I don't believe that. I believe our schools need to work on what's going on internally, because as I've said before, Arizona is 5th in the nation. Okay, that's where our education is, our children. You got Iowa that spends less per kid, and they're number 2 in the nation. Our charter schools spend half of what our public schools spend, and they're number 1 in the nation.
Mrs. Grijalva, 30 seconds.
Yeah, when you look at, you're seriously comparing apples to oranges here. Our charter school systems can cherry pick students. They can decide who's going to be enrolled and who isn't. And when you look at the devastating cuts that Trump is enacting, it's $1 billion a year, almost $1 billion a year to abolish the Department of Education. That's something that we cannot recover from. And public education is the one thing that opens doors of opportunities for everyone.
I'd like to do just a couple yes or no questions before we get to closing statements here, mainly with the economy. If tariffs increase costs for Arizona families, would you support federal relief or subsidies for small businesses and households most affected? Yes or no, Mr. Butierez?
Yes.
Mrs. Grijalva, yes or no, federal subsidies for small business and households?
Yes.
Should Congress have more authority in approving or limiting presidential tariff actions similar to its role in war powers? Yes or no, Mrs. Grijalva?
Absolutely yes.
Yes or no, Mr. Butierrez?
No.
No. Okay. I'd also like to ask you a little bit more on water as well. We've got time for a short section on that. As we do face a historic drought, we all know the needs here. The water rights contract in the West still being negotiated as well. So what role should Congress play in ensuring sustainable and equitable water access for Arizona? 1 minute, Mr. Butierrez.
I believe our federal government needs to come in and regulate it for things like the Blue Project that's coming in, and they're just going to take our water. We need that water for farming. We need it for industries. We need it for our tribes. I think it's wrong that companies are just going to come in and do whatever they want with our water. That's where I stand on that.
Mrs. Grijalva, how do you balance economic growth, development with the need to conserve limited water resources? And what role should Congress play in developing Arizona's share?
Arizona must get its fair share of water. And I think that farmers in California need to do their part, just like the farmers in Arizona are doing our part. They're some of the most creative conservation systems are happening here in Arizona. And every basin state must contribute to a long-term solution for sustainability and long-term conservation efforts. But we also have to rein in these corporations that are drawing an incredible amount of water. So here we are trying to make sure I'm watching my kids, making sure they turn off the water when they're brushing their teeth. We're doing our best to do our conservation efforts, but it is a literal drop in the bucket to what companies are doing. And Arizona must also address its own responses to limitations for existing water supplies. And Pima County has done an amazing job with wastewater in trying to rebuild our aquifers and replenish our aquifers, and we need to do more of that.
Mr. Butierez, agriculture itself is a major need of water, but it's also a big economic driver. Would you support shifting toward less water-intensive crops, even if that hurts short-term farm revenue, or do you see a different solution? 1 minute.
I would not change the crops that we need because we produce what we have to produce. Mexico produces what they need to produce. Each state produces what they produce. Yuma is lettuce. Lettuce is the big thing in Yuma. Yuma actually has quite a bit of water because they're on the Colorado River. But I would try and do some like, for example, start saving the water that comes down the river, the Santa Cruz River. How about we start blocking it up and let that water soak back into the ground instead of just running down into the ocean?
Mrs. Grijalava, tribal nations hold senior water rights, but they often lack the infrastructure to use them. So should reallocations of federal investment prioritize those rights, even if it raises costs elsewhere?
Well, our tribal nations have long-standing water rights claims. And so I think it's important to support the Northeastern Arizona Indian Water Rights Settlement Act and honor the obligations to these communities. They are rarely taking their acre feet in their allocations, and they should have, that is a commodity that they can sell if they'd like. But I think our communities need to have like the right of first refusal and be able to use that. But when we're looking at some of the crops and the water utilization, flood irrigation is something that we don't see often in Arizona, but it's happening a lot up the Colorado River chain, where we at Yuma are at the end. So I think we all have to do our part to conserve.
Does Congress, or would you in Congress, fight for more for Arizona because we split it with several states? Ms. Grijalava, you first, 30 seconds.
Well, I think that it's important for us to stake the claims of the allocations that we have, ensure that our tribal nations are getting their fair share, and making sure that everyone is conserving all the way down. Water is a precious resource that is declining. I mean, we have to acknowledge the fact that we are in a climate crisis, and that Tucson and Arizona have had hotter days last year, and we continue to break records. So our water is, reducing in the basins.
Mr. Butierez, would you fight in Congress so that Arizona gets more of the pie, or do we have to work with what we've got? Briefly.
I would fight to get more of the pie because we are a hotter, drier climate than most states. Yeah.
Okay. I do appreciate both of you for participating today. That does bring us closer to the end of our time. And so we will get to our closing statements. You each are going to have 1 minute. If you go a little over, I will politely interrupt you and cut you off. After drawing straws, Mr. Butierez, once again, you have the first closing statement. You have 1 minute.
Thank you for having me here tonight. And in my closing statement, I want to let you all know that my passion is to help the homeless here in Southern Arizona, Yuma, Tucson, Phoenix. It's become a major crisis here. And I'm asking for your vote. Okay? I'm not running because I wanted to be a politician. I never wanted to be a politician. I'm running because I am the person who can help our homeless, who can get them off the street and get them back on their feet to becoming productive members of our community. So if you would, I ask that you vote for me. Thank you.
Mrs. Grijalava, you have 1 minute.
Thank you so much. I was born and raised in Southern Arizona. I know how important it is to have representation that is true. Someone that looks like you, someone that shares your roots, your hopes, your dreams, and your struggles in a position of leadership and making decisions. Representation is about the collective voice. It's not about one person. So when you send me to Congress, I will fight to ensure that your voice is heard in the halls of Congress. When I'm fighting for environmental justice for all, for Medicaid for all, for raise the wage, for the Equality Act and the Ending Homelessness Act, those are my priorities. I want to be your voice in Congress and share the voices of Southern Arizona loud and proud. And I will always remember who sent me to Congress. Thank you so much for your time and attention. My name's Adelita Grijalva, and I'm asking for your vote.
We appreciate you both. A reminder, early voting starts tomorrow. On behalf of all of our partners, thank you for joining us.